Hi, I'm Jason Hennig from Something About a Pie. I'm also Sunday School Superintendent here at King of Kings Lutheran Church. Why does that matter? Today I want to talk about kids. Specifically, I want to talk about kids and rules, and how kids view rules in a moral sense. The purpose of this video is to serve as an instructional resource for teachers, parents, and anybody who wants to help and work with kids, as well as how the structuring of rules for children fits within a Christian perspective. In order to understand how children view morality and rules, we have to look at the work of one man named Jean Piaget, particularly two key concepts: the morality of constraint and the morality of cooperation. These two concepts reflect a natural progression that, in general, every child goes through. Let's go chronologically for simplicity's sake, and we'll start with the morality of constraint. The morality of constraint typically starts around 4 years of age. According to Piaget, from there to about age 10, we'll talk about that later, children accept rules as immovable. However, until age 7, they see rules as a social behavior of older children, and attempt to mimic their attention to the rules. But at 7, they understand what rules are, and they'll follow them because they view them as sacred or ironclad. However, you are probably aware that children don't follow rules. They often break rules and occasionally act defiantly. How does this make sense with the idea that young children accept rules at face value? Typically, this phenomenon occurs because young children don't understand the rules. Another common situation is that an older child who no longer accepts rules at face value is the model for a younger child to mimic. In either of these cases, the child wants to follow the rules, but either because they don't understand or because they think rules are best followed like their older counterpart, they fail to do so adequately. So how do you deal with these two problems? First, when children act out, make sure you reinforce that the behavior was wrong. Tell them that they have broken a rule and explain why. Children at this age have a difficult time understanding that similar situations have similar outcomes, because they're too young to understand transferring concepts. Therefore, be patient and before punishing them, inform them that what they are doing is wrong. Don't proverbially spare the rod, but do let them know where the rod lies before you use it. It's important to realize that punishment will do no good if the child does not know what you are punishing them for. As far as older children acting out goes, we'll address that as we begin talking about the morality of cooperation. The morality of cooperation begins, according to Piaget, between 10 and 12 years of age. Again, we'll get back to the age thing. This is when children begin to understand the actual purpose of rules, and they begin to understand rules as an agreement between two parties. Let's take Piaget's example of a snowball fight. A group of boys decided to have a snowball fight, and they elected officers, divided into teams, and they went about setting their own rules. They created a system of rules and a system of punishments for breaking those rules. For instance, if a snowball was thrown at too short a distance. This took a lot of time away for them to actually play, but it didn't matter. They enjoyed the process of creating rules. It's not that they didn't have rules already that adults had put forward, they just preferred to make their own rules nevertheless. This was an actual observation that Piaget made watching actual boys have an actual snowball fight. All this to say that children of this age no longer take rules at face value. They like to bend rules to better fit specific situations. And they see rules as shared, not as external values that are passed to them by authority figures. It's because of this that you see children of this age ask questions like, even if there was some other circumstance, even if I accidentally tripped and I bumped into the book. They will ask that kind of question after you explain a rule. This phenomenon is often the motivating force behind children's misbehavior around this age. They are more likely to perceive rules as stifling if they had no hand in making them. So, how is this problem solved? Simply put, rule negotiation around core values. In other words, you decide the spirit of the law, but let the children decide the letter. If you want children to stop taking each other's materials, for instance, have them draft a law that says as much, and be willing to negotiate about what exactly the rule entails. Now, let's talk about age. Piaget suggested that the transition of moralities at certain ages was predictable, even inevitable. However, Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky suggested that instead, children develop cognitively by interacting with adults and other children. Moral development is probably impossible without cognitive development because it is very difficult for children to follow a rule that they cannot understand. And anyone who works with children can attest to the fact that the development of a child is anything but predictable, and that hard, exact rules are subsequently rarely useful. Vygotsky's interpretation, therefore, seems somewhat more compelling. So why does this matter? On paper, it doesn't. A properly socialized child will develop morally at the same pace that Piaget suggested, and so it won't matter who was correct. However, in practice, sometimes children are more or less socialized than we expect, and their moral development may therefore be faster or slower. In fact, many children who are better socialized or more intelligent may begin exhibiting the morality of cooperation by age 8. If you work with a wide age group or work with children between the age of 8 and 10, this could become a challenge. You will need to learn to negotiate rules with children who are older or more developed, while also instructing younger children that rules are meant to be followed. Such a balance is different for every group of children, and there is no way to know exactly what will be effective. Practice is key. So that in general is how children view morality, and then the ways to deal with inevitable misbehavior. So how does all of this fit within the Christian perspective? Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." What this means is that children do need moral instruction. There are many more verses about ensuring that children have good moral guidance, and Proverbs famously says not to spare the rod. If children are punished, they will learn. So rules are clearly important in a biblical sense. We've talked about how punishing a child should be framed, ensuring that they are aware of what they are doing wrong. However, there is one very important piece of information that is required when framing punishments. Punishment requires, 1, that the child be administered something negative in response to bad behavior, and 2, that the behavior changes when punishment is administered. If the behavior does not change, you cannot say you have punished the child. If the negative response is not effective, you probably shouldn't use it. Again, you shouldn't spare the rod, but if one method of the rod isn't working, it's senseless to keep using it that way. The upshot of this is that rules should be used to guide children to live good, upright lives. Rules are excellent tools to educate children. To that end, it's best to have rules that are practical and biblical. Rules that are intentionally restrictive or overbearing will cause resentment, and even rebellion, not education. Most importantly, do not forget that the scriptural message of forgiveness through Jesus Christ is paramount. Don't hold grudges over misbehavior, and deal with it when it arises. In brief, all your rules should be written with the same intent as biblical rules, in love and compassion to save, not with the desire to punish. If the rule is written in anger, maybe review it and consider whether or not it was skewed to benefit the one who wrote it. That's all we've got for today. We might revisit the development of morality if there seems to be an interest in it, but for now, we'll see you later. There are many more verses about ensuring that children have good moral violence. Moral violence. Well, that was the Israelites in the Old Testament. That's moral violence.